Behind me, in my bedroom, we have the new 2021 Specialized Diverge. For 2021, the bike gets a comprehensive refresh, adopting the Future Shock 2.0, which we've already seen on the Roubaix, getting slightly longer, slacker, and controversially, ever so slightly higher geometry, and increased tyre clearances overall. Alongside the regular drop bar bike, which we have behind me, Specialized is also launching a flat bar gravel bike. That is right, things have gone full circle, and an old school mountain bike is the cutting edge of gravel bike technology in 2021. The new Diverge range features 9 different models, starting at £949 for the cheapest aluminium model, rising to a truly heady £8,900 for the top flight S-Works model. The launch of this bike comes off the back of well-documented, enormous growth of the gravel market. Now that in itself isn't really a revelation, but what is notable is that Specialized says, given the growth of the segment of the market, they expect gravel to be by far the biggest area for them in the coming years, if not with this bike. So a lot of tech has gone into this bike, and we've got a lot to talk through. Now, before we take a deep dive into this bike, don't forget to comment with any of your questions and make sure you let me know what you think of my bedroom, which is also acting as a studio during lockdown. And as always, do not forget to like, subscribe, and click that little bell icon so every time we upload a video, you will get a notification. Now, the headline news with this bike is the adoption of the aforementioned Future Shock 2.0. Now, for those of you that aren't aware of what the Future Shock is, it's a technology that Specialized introduced with the latest version of the Roubaix, and it's essentially a small suspension system which sits between the cockpit and the head tube. Now, we've spoken at depth about why Specialized went for this system rather than a kind of traditional telescopic fork, which places the suspension beneath the head tube. And we've got loads of links to reviews of the old Roubaix talking about the Diverge in the video description. But in brief, the system is really designed to kind of reduce fatigue and kind of take the sting out of, chatter on gravel trails or cobbles as it was originally designed for, rather than kind of increasing speed over super rough terrain as you would find with mountain bike suspension. Now, if you haven't ridden a bike with the Future Shock, it can feel a little bit gimmicky, and to be honest, when it first launched, I was very skeptical. However, the technology has come along quite a lot since it was first introduced, and I've used it in various guises, notably on the Diverge, the previous generation one, and I am a real convert. I'm not the only one on BikeRadar who's a big fan of the technology. Matthew Allen with his current Roubaix test bike is also a big fan, and previously, the first generation of the Roubaix to feature the Future Shock also won our Bike of the Year a couple years back. Now, as I hinted at previously, this version of the Future Shock has hydraulic damping, whereas before it was just a simple case of adjustable springs that would change how the suspension handled. And again, we have found that hydraulic damping does make a significant difference to how it handles overall. Now, every carbon model in the Diverge lineup does come with a Future Shock, but it is only the top 4 spec models which come with the Future Shock 2.0. All other bikes in the range come with the Future Shock 1.5. And the key difference again is that the 1.5 does not have that hydraulic damping, and it also does not have the lockout or adjuster. The 2 very cheapest models in the Diverge lineup do not feature the Future Shock. Now, onto the geometry. Compared to the outgoing model, the bike gets a longer offset fork, a very slightly slacker head angle, longer reach overall, a slightly longer wheelbase overall, and as I mentioned, a very slightly higher bottom bracket. Now, if you've been following mountain bike geometry trends in recent years, none of this will come as a surprise. Bikes have become ever longer, slacker, and they do tend to have lower bottom brackets on the mountain bike side of things. Again, we've got lots of videos on this subject, and Seb Stott, my fellow Scottish colleague, describes it far better than I could ever. But in brief, a longer reach, when you match it with a shorter stem, makes a rider less pitched over the front of the bike, so in steeper terrain, you get more control and more confidence. Likewise with a slacker head angle. Now, the same is true of gravel bikes, and Specialized has very much adopted that ethos with the new Diverge. It's actually gone as far to say that the geometry is directly inspired by its new epic hardtail. Now, the crossover between gravel bikes and mountain bikes is increasingly blurred, and brands try to sell them as being quite distinct things. So it's nice for Specialized to just come out and say, oh yeah, this is very much inspired by a mountain bike. It's a refreshing approach. Thumbs up. Now, in contrast to those trends, with the bottom bracket, it's actually been raised on this bike, but only by a very marginal amount, and that's just by 5mm. And the reason Specialized has done this is to reduce the chances of pedal strike when running 650B wheels. Tyre clearances on the new Diverge have also been increased quite significantly, rising from 42mm to 47mm on 700C wheels and rising to a truly chunky, for gravel bikes, 2.1 inch on 650B wheels. Now, I cannot imagine a single situation where I would need a tyre bigger than 2.1 inch on a gravel bike, because if you do, you probably should be riding a mountain bike. So there should be more than enough for your fashionable, Instagram-ready gravel adventures. However, as always, and we say this with pretty much every new bike, those figures are quoted with a 6mm gap on either side of the tyre. So if you really need a bigger tyre, you should be able to squeeze something in a little bit chunkier. Now, thanks to those generous clearances, this also means that the bike can run 42mm tyres with mudguards. It is a rare treat these days to find a truly racy carbon drop bar bike that has the capability to run mudguards. And I love mudguards. I don't like having a wet bum. And on that note, you can also run a rear rack on this bike. Certain front racks are also compatible with the fork, but Specialized has some quite clear guidelines about what you should and shouldn't be using. So refer to their website if you have any questions about that. Now, to accommodate those larger tyres as well as single and double chain sets, Specialized have developed like a solid carbon yoke that sits on the drive side chainstay. Now, the reason it's done this, even though it supposedly adds a little bit of weight, is because it wanted to avoid using either a raised or dropped chainstay, as is seen on something like the Allied Able. There was no real reason given for this, and to be honest, I think it's more of a kind of taste question rather than an engineering question, but that's totally my speculation. I can imagine that for a consumer, it's quite a hard thing to stomach if you're just getting into bikes. And that's one thing I should really stress with this. With the Diverge, bear in mind that Specialized is thinking this is going to become its biggest category. The range for the new bike is massive. It covers a huge amount of price points, and this bike really could do it, as many other gravel bikes can, do it all for many riders. And I think that kind of approach to building in capability with the bike and increased capability is something we're going to see from more manufacturers in the near future. Now, another feature which has been ported onto this bike, and I've previously used it on the stump jumper, is the SWAT Storage Box in the down tube. Now, this is only seen on the Comp, Expert, Pro and S-Works model of the Diverge, but essentially, Specialized has taken full advantage of the big chunky down tube to create a little sandwich box in the down tube, and that's accessed with a lockable kind of lid which sits just below the bottle cage. I've used this system in the past, and it's the sort of thing that as soon as you have it, you're going to wish every bike had, genuinely. I know it sounds like I'm drinking the Specialized Kool-Aid from that very SWAT box, but honestly, it is so useful, particularly on something like a gravel bike where you might want to take more spares, more tubes, Dynaplugs, style kits, that sort of thing. Ah yes, the elephant in the room, the Diverge Evo. Now, the Diverge Evo is a longer, slacker, more aggressive version of the Diverge, and yes, it has flat bars. It's almost as if flat bars make sense for riding off-road. Who knew? Now, the Evo name has been used for quite some time by Specialized to define more left field, or alternatively, for the lack of a better phrase, rowdier versions of bikes in its lineup. And the Diverge Evo is no different. As I mentioned, it's a slightly longer frame overall, and the reach is increased by about 30mm roughly across all sizes. The head tube has just got that little bit slacker, and the bike as stock comes with chunkier tyres. But yes, it also has flat bars. This just tickles me endlessly, because on the one hand, it's a marketing coup. It's a genius move on the part of Specialized, where you look back at something like the Canyon Grail and its crazy hover bars, and everybody was talking about that bike. The whole internet went crazy for it because it was just so far out. And I think with the Diverge Evo, Specialized is probably hoping for the same thing because everyone's going to remember the Diverge name then. A chunky tired, rigid, flat bar gravel bike, which you could call a hybrid by any other name, isn't quite as controversial as something like the hover bar, but it's still an interesting development, and what Specialized is kind of pitching it as maybe the future of gravel. They haven't said as much, and I did ask them in the launch for it, what were they going to name this category? And don't forget, Specialized is a brand that loves to name everything by its own admission, and they just decide to stick with gravel for now. But that's not really up to them. I think it's going to be you, the viewers, who decide that one. So what is the new category? Is it the performance aggressive hybrid? Is it gravel plus? Is it mountain biking? Let me know what you think in the comments. The bike is available in 2 different builds. Both of them are based on an aluminium frame, notably with the Future Shock 2.0, and most of the components come from the mountain bike side of things. So there's some interesting crossover there, and I'm really interested to see how the public as a whole accepts or detests this bike. Now, if you've seen our videos before, you will know that this is roughly the time where I would tell you how the new bike rides, usually off the back of a launch. But guess what? I'm filming a video in my bedroom. Things are not quite where they usually are. I haven't actually had a chance to ride this bike yet. All of our testing is on lockdown for now. We don't think it's appropriate to continue with that, given the current climate. So you're gonna have to wait. Now, regardless, this is a very interesting bike and one we're really looking forward to heading out on the trails with. And you can expect a full review one day when things are a little bit more back to normal. I think to round things out, I'll say that the new Diverge is more like a refresh of the model rather than a wholesale change. There's some really welcome changes in there. In particular, the Future Shock, the new one on those top end models, I really think that's going to make a difference to off-road control and comfort compared to the outgoing model. It is honestly universally liked here at BikeRadar. We've all spent a lot of time on it, and it is a very, very clever little system. The other changes, such as the increased tyre clearance and the kind of updated geometry, they're all going to be very welcome, but I think it's going to be that new Future Shock which just pushes it that little bit further ahead compared to the outgoing bike. Now, thank you for watching. As always, please leave any questions in the comments. If you're looking for more information, head to bikeradar.com, and of course there's a link in the video description where we've got way more detail on the bike. If you have any remarks about my increasingly wild lockdown hair, this lovely t-shirt, how badly I've lit the scene, anything at all, I'm always keen to hear your feedback. And lastly, do not forget to like, subscribe, and click that little bell icon, so every time we upload a video like this, you will get a notification. Goodbye.